was just another quiet night in the Nevada desert when Ethan Monroe's routine research took a turn he never could have anticipated. Alone under the stars, he was studying strange signals when a blinding flash of light shattered the silence, revealing a woman unlike anything he had ever seen. She wasn't from Earth. Before he could ask any questions, she vanished, leaving him with only one truth. He was about to be dragged into a secret that could change the fate of his world. Who was she? Why was she here? And what terrifying decision did the universe have in store for Earth? As the stakes rise, Ethan must decide. Is humanity worth saving? The answers lie within a choice no one saw coming. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel by clicking the card button on the top right corner and hitting the notification bell so you can get amazing daily stories as and when published. Please do comment your views about the story or any topic that you want to get a story on. We will make it happen. Let's dive in the story. The desert stretched endlessly, an ocean of sand under a pitch-black sky. Ethan Monroe adjusted his glasses and checked his watch. He had been out here for hours, waiting, listening, scanning the endless horizon. The radio signals his lab had detected weren't normal. They weren't random cosmic noise. They were deliberate. Someone or something was transmitting them. A soft wind howled through the valley, rustling the dry shrubs. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his gloved hands together. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was a scientist, a man of logic. But there was something undeniably strange about what was happening out here. Then it happened. A blinding flash of blue light split the sky, turning night into day for a fraction of a second. Ethan stumbled back, shielding his eyes. The air around him vibrated, his skin prickling as if charged with static electricity. The ground beneath him trembled. Not an earthquake, but something deeper, something unnatural. Then silence. Ethan's breath came fast, his heart hammering against his ribs. He swallowed hard and reached for his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the rocky terrain. That's when he saw her. A woman stood just beyond the glow of his truck's headlights. Tall, poised, her sleek black suit shimmering faintly as if woven from liquid metal. Her long, silver-white hair cascaded down her back, framing a face that was almost too perfect. High cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that glowed green like emerald fire. Ethan's grip tightened on his flashlight. His mind raced through possibilities. Who was she? A lost traveler? A government agent? Something else? Before he could speak, the woman tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. Then, in a voice smooth and hypnotic, she spoke. "You shouldn't be here, Ethan Monroe." His stomach dropped. How did she know his name? Ethan took a cautious step forward, every nerve in his body on high alert. "Who are you?" His voice came out steadier than he expected. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a slow step forward, her movements impossibly graceful. Her gaze never wavered, locking onto his like she was searching for something, measuring him. "You need to leave," she said softly. "Now." Ethan hesitated. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to listen, to get back in his truck and drive. But something about her, the way she watched him, the unspoken urgency in her voice, kept him rooted in place. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, taking another step closer. "Not until you tell me what's going on here." For the briefest moment, something flickered across her face. Regret? Sadness? Fear? Then, just as suddenly it was gone. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then make me understand." Ethan pressed. She exhaled, glancing up at the sky, her glowing eyes reflecting the distant stars. For a moment, she looked almost lost. Then, without another word, she turned and vanished into the darkness, moving so fast that Ethan barely registered the movement. "Wait," Ethan called, lunging forward. But she was gone. Only the whispering wind remained, carrying the faintest trace of something foreign, a scent that didn't belong to this world. Ethan barely slept that night. His mind kept replaying the encounter. Her voice, her glowing green eyes, the way she had vanished like a ghost in the wind. He had spent years researching unexplainable phenomena, but never had he encountered something so real. By morning, he was back at his lab, poring over the data from his instruments. The radio signals he had recorded were stronger than before, structured, rhythmic, almost like a language. He traced the patterns, cross-referencing them with every known frequency. Nothing matched. A shiver ran down his spine. This wasn't interference. It was a message. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. He needed answers, and there was only one place to get them. That night, under a sky littered with stars, Ethan returned to the desert. His truck's engine hummed softly as he parked in the same spot. He glanced at the clock. 2 minutes until the exact time he had seen her. The air was cold and still. He grabbed his thermal scanner and switched it on, watching the screen flicker to life. Nothing. Just the usual heat signatures from the rocks and sand. He exhaled, scanning the area again. Then, the temperature dropped. Fast. A chill ran through him as he watched the numbers plummet. 90 degrees. 80, 60, 40. The wind kicked up, swirling around him like a whisper. His breath came out in a fog. And then, she was there, standing just a few feet away, her silver-white hair billowing in the unseen current. Her glowing green eyes locked onto his. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I told you not to come back," she said, her voice soft but firm. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. "And yet, here I am," he said, stepping closer. "I need to know who you are." She watched him, her expression unreadable. He took another step. "Are you human?" A flicker of something. Sadness? Pain? Crossed her face before she looked away. "No," she whispered. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He had suspected it, but hearing her say it out loud sent a rush of adrenaline through his body. "Then what are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a breath. She hesitated. Then, she turned her gaze to the sky. "I was sent here," she murmured, "to observe. To ensure your kind never discovers what lies beyond." Ethan frowned. "Beyond what?" Her jaw tightened. She shook her head. "You ask too many questions." "That's what I do," he shot back. "I'm a scientist." Something like amusement flashed in her glowing eyes. But just as quickly, her expression darkened. "You shouldn't be involved in this," she said. "If they find out I've spoken to you..." A low, mechanical hum rumbled through the air, making the ground vibrate beneath them. Celine's eyes widened in alarm. "They know," she whispered. Ethan barely had time to react before she grabbed his wrist. "Run." Ethan's feet barely touched the ground as he sprinted alongside Celine, his heart hammering in his chest. The low mechanical hum grew louder, vibrating through his bones like an oncoming storm. He didn't know what was chasing them, who was chasing them, but the sheer panic in Celine's eyes told him one thing. This wasn't just a threat. This was a hunt. She pulled him toward a narrow crevice between two jagged rock formations. Ethan stumbled, but kept moving, adrenaline fueling his every step. As soon as they slipped into the darkness, Celine pressed a hand against the smooth rock wall. A faint glow pulsed from her fingertips, and suddenly, the rock shifted, forming a seamless barrier behind them. Ethan gasped for breath, pressing his palms to his knees. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. Celine didn't answer. Her glowing green eyes flickered in the dim light as she pressed her ear to the wall. She was listening. Ethan swallowed hard, his pulse still racing. "Celine, what's going on?" She turned to him, her expression grim. "They've been tracking me. I broke protocol when I spoke to you." "Who are they?" he demanded. She hesitated, as if debating whether to tell him. Then she sighed. "My people, the ones who sent me here." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "And they're trying to kill you?" "What?" Celine exhaled slowly, stepping away from the wall. Because I disobeyed. I was never meant to reveal myself to you, let alone bring you here. Ethan blinked. Wait, where exactly is here? Celine reached in her suit and pressed something on her wrist. A soft, blue light illuminated the chamber, revealing what lay around them. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The walls weren't rock, they were metal. Smooth, dark, and pulsing faintly with energy. Strange symbols glowed along the surface, shifting and changing as he watched. The air itself felt alive. This place, Celine said, her voice softer now, is not from your world. Ethan turned in a slow circle, trying to take it all in. You're telling me this is an alien base? She nodded. His mind spun, 1,000 questions fighting for space. How long has this been here? A long time, she murmured. Hidden beneath your deserts, buried under your oceans, orbiting your skies. We've always been here, Ethan. The weight of her words settled deep in his chest. Everything he had ever believed about life, about the universe, had just shattered. He took a shaky breath. Why were you sent here? Were you observing? Celine hesitated. Your species. Ethan frowned. What? She met his gaze, and for the first time he saw something behind those glowing green eyes. A secret, a burden. Because, she whispered, the decision is coming soon. A cold dread seeped into Ethan's bones. Decision. She took a slow step toward him. Whether your world is worth saving or not. Ethan's mind was reeling. The room, the facility, felt colder, darker than before, as if it was listening, waiting. He looked around at the strange, metallic walls that seemed to hum with a quiet, eerie energy. Celine's words echoed in his mind. The decision is coming soon. What decision? What did that even mean for Earth? For him? He glanced at her. She was standing near the far wall, her eyes scanning something only she could see, her fingers tapping against the surface like she was feeling for something. I need you to explain, Ethan said, his voice urgent. What's going to happen? What's a decision? Celine didn't look at him. She was focused, her brow furrowed. The decision comes when the species we've been watching reach a threshold, she said, her voice low. When they show they can no longer control their violence, their greed, their destruction. Ethan's chest tightened. You're talking about humans, aren't you? She nodded slowly. Your kind. The ones who think they're in control. A chill washed over him. He wasn't sure what disturbed him more. The fact that she was speaking about his species with such coldness, or the implication that an alien race had been observing Earth all this time, judging it. Judging him. Are you saying, Ethan's voice faltered, are you saying the decision is to destroy us? Celine's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something almost human in them. Guilt? I don't know, she said softly, but I'm not supposed to care. I was never meant to feel like this. Her admission stunned him into silence. He watched as she lowered her head, her fingers still tracing the glowing symbols on the wall. It was clear she was hiding something from him, something important. Suddenly, the hum from the walls grew louder, more insistent. The blue light around them pulsed with an urgency that matched the growing tension between them. Celine turned sharply, her eyes flashing with something almost feral. They're coming, she whispered. Ethan didn't need to ask who she meant. He could feel it. The ground beneath him vibrated, as if the very earth was reacting to the looming threat. He looked at her, confusion and fear pooling in his chest. Who's coming? She didn't answer, her gaze flicking toward the entrance to the chamber. Ethan's eyes followed her, his heart racing. Then he heard it, a low, ominous growl like the sound of machinery coming to life. But this was different. This sound was alive. Celine grabbed his wrist. We need to move. Now. Before he could protest, she yanked him down a narrow corridor, the walls around them narrowing and twisting in ways that seemed impossible. The whole structure seemed to be alive, shifting to keep them on the run. As they ran, Ethan's mind raced. Celine, what's going on? Who are they? Why are they coming for you? She didn't answer. But he could feel the weight of her silence. She was hiding something. She had always been hiding something. The corridor led them to a vast chamber, darker and colder than the last. A strange, metallic door slid open in front of them, revealing a ship-like vessel glowing with blue energy. "This is the only way out," she said, her voice tight. "But you have to promise me. No matter what you see, you trust me." Ethan stared at her. Something in her expression told him that this, whatever this was their last chance. He didn't hesitate. "I trust you," he said, his voice steady despite the fear surging through him. Celine gave a brief nod, pulling him toward the glowing ship. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, closer now. They didn't have much time. The ship's hatch hissed open, and the two of them stepped inside. As the door sealed behind them, Celine looked at him one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This was never supposed to happen." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, the ship lurched, and the world outside them disappeared. The moment the hatch closed, Ethan felt the weight of the world pressing on him. The ship, a sleek silver craft that hummed softly beneath their feet, lifted off the ground with a jolt, the desert floor rapidly falling away. The stars outside the window blurred into streaks of light as they shot through the atmosphere, a silent speed that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Celine stood near the controls, her movements fluid, almost graceful. She didn't seem to be affected by the rapid ascent. Her focus was intense, her glowing green eyes never wavering from the screens in front of her. Ethan watched her, his mind still spinning from everything that had just happened. He had been on a simple mission to study radio signals. Now, he was inside a spaceship with a woman who had just admitted to being from another world. "So, where are we going?" Ethan asked, his voice shaky with a mixture of awe and confusion. Celine didn't look at him as she adjusted the controls. "Somewhere safe." Ethan frowned. "Safe from what?" She paused, her fingers hovering over the console. Finally, she turned to him, her face serious. "Safe from them. My people. They won't stop looking for us." Ethan's chest tightened. "Your people?" She nodded. "They sent me here to observe your species, to monitor you." But she hesitated, her gaze distant for a moment. "I couldn't just watch. I couldn't stay silent." Ethan swallowed, trying to process everything. "But why? Why would they want to destroy Earth? I mean, you said they were going to make a decision. What's that about?" Celine's expression darkened. "You don't understand. Your species," she paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "You're teetering on the edge of something dangerous. Something I can't explain. But they believe it's too late for you. Too late for all of you." A cold shiver ran through Ethan. "What do you mean, too late?" She turned toward him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and regret. "I was sent to stop you from making the same mistakes that led to the destruction of other worlds. But I failed. I can't stop it. Not anymore." Ethan opened his mouth to ask more, but the ship's controls suddenly blinked red. A loud beeping sound filled the room, and the smooth hum of the craft was replaced by a harsh, warning tone. Celine cursed under her breath. "They found us." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "The ones I told you about," she said, her voice tight with panic. "My people. They've tracked the signal from the ship." Before Ethan could respond, the ship lurched violently, throwing them both forward. The walls around them shook, and the faint glow of the instruments flickered. Outside the windows, a massive, shadowed craft appeared, its sleek, dark silhouette blotting out the stars. "They're here," Celine breathed. "We need to hide. Now." She pulled Ethan toward a small compartment at the back of the ship, her grip firm and urgent. As they ducked into the tiny space, Ethan's mind raced. He could hear the distant rumbling of the enemy ship's engines, the sense of being hunted, of being too late to escape. Celine slammed the compartment door shut, sealing them inside. She glanced at Ethan, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "If they find us, there's no going back. We'll be taken back to their world. And you." She stopped, her voice breaking. "You'll never see Earth again." Ethan's breath quickened. "So, what are we going to do?" Celine hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice barely a whisper. "We're going to fight." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for the first time, Ethan truly understood the gravity of what was happening. The universe wasn't just observing Earth. It was waiting to decide whether humanity was worth saving. And now, he was part of that decision. As the ship rocked again, louder this time, Celine's hand shot out, gripping his arm. "You're not just helping me escape," she said. "You're helping save your entire world." The atmosphere inside the ship was thick with tension. The walls hummed ominously as the shadowed craft outside continued to hover menacingly, sending tremors through the floor. Ethan's pulse hammered in his throat as he watched Celine move swiftly across the control panel. Her movements were precise, but there was a certain urgency to them now, an edge of fear that hadn't been there before. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice tight as she worked the controls. Ethan's heart raced. "What do you mean? What are they doing?" Celine didn't look at him as she adjusted the instruments. "They're preparing to board. They know we're here. They won't stop until they have me." "But why you?" Ethan asked, confusion and fear twisting in his gut. "Why is this so important to them?" Celine's face was a mask of determination, but her eyes flashed with something else, something darker. She met his gaze. "Because I've broken their laws. I was sent here to observe, not interfere. But I made a choice to save you, to save Earth." And now, she trailed off, her fingers gripping the controls harder. "Now they'll stop at nothing to make sure I pay for that decision." Ethan took a step closer to her, his voice softer but insistent. "You didn't do anything wrong. You were trying to help." She gave him a fleeting, bitter smile. "Maybe, but they don't see it that way. They see it as treason." Before Ethan could say anything else, the ship shook violently again, this time throwing both of them to the ground. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The enemy ship was getting closer, much closer. Celine pushed herself up, her eyes scanning the readouts. Her face paled as she processed the information. "We need to go now," she said, urgency creeping into her voice. "But how? We can't outrun them," Ethan protested, looking at the dark ship outside. It was almost unfathomably large, and its dark, imposing shape filled the window. Celine's lips tightened as she stood, moving to the back of the ship. She pressed a button on the wall, revealing a hidden hatch. The compartment opened to reveal a sleek, glowing pod, small, fast, and deadly. "This is our only chance," she said, her voice low. "I've configured the ship's systems to give us a distraction, but we can't stay in this craft. We need to get to the escape pod and get far enough away that they can't track us." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding, though fear gripped his chest. He had no idea what was about to happen, but he trusted Celine, trusted her more than he had ever trusted anyone before. They rushed to the pod, Celine already working the controls to power it up. The ship outside began to make a low, menacing growl, the noise vibrating through the walls of their craft. It was clear the enemy was closing in. "Celine, what will happen if we get caught?" Ethan asked, his voice strained. She didn't answer right away, her fingers flying across the control panel. Finally, she looked at him, her expression more solemn than ever. "If we get caught, they'll take us back," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But it won't just be me they're after. They'll go after Earth. They'll finish what they started." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle heavily on his shoulders. "Then we can't let them catch us," he said, more to himself than her. With a final click, Celine activated the pod's launch sequence. The vessel hummed to life, a soft, familiar warmth washing over them as the countdown began. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Ethan could hear his own heart pounding in his ears as the pod began to tremble. Through the windows, he could see the other ship now, massive and foreboding, a shadow over everything. "Ethan," Celine's voice was barely a whisper. She turned to him, her face inches away. No matter what happens, promise me, you won't give up on Earth. Ethan's breath caught. I won't. The pod shot forward, rocketing out of the ship with a violent jolt. The last thing Ethan saw before the stars blurred into streaks of light was the enemy ship's menacing silhouette, just a few hundred feet away. And in that moment, he knew this was no longer about just him and Celine. This was about something far bigger, Earth's future, and it all depended on the choices they made now. The escape pod tore through the stars, its engines roaring as they hurtled away from the enemy ship. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps, his mind racing. Had they made it? Were they truly free? Or was the fight just beginning? Beside him, Celine sat at the controls, her face drawn and focused. She didn't look at him, didn't speak, but he could feel the tension radiating off her. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken words. "Where are we going?" Ethan finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice was strained, still reeling from the adrenaline. Celine's eyes flickered to him for a brief moment. Somewhere safe, far away from them. He nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Her words, "somewhere safe," didn't reassure him. The decision she had hinted at, the danger they were facing, was still looming over them like an unforgiving shadow. After a long pause, Celine spoke again. "Ethan, what I'm about to tell you isn't easy, but you need to understand." He turned to her, anxiety creeping into his chest. "What's going on, Celine? What aren't you telling me?" She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the ship's controls. "I wasn't just sent here to observe. I was sent to test your species, to determine if Earth should be allowed to continue." Ethan's heart stopped. "Test us," he repeated. "What do you mean?" Her eyes met his, a quiet sadness in them. "Your world is at a crossroads, Ethan. It's always been this way. Violence, greed, war. You're on the verge of destroying yourselves. The decision wasn't just mine to make. It was the Council's." Ethan shook his head, his mind racing. "So what? You've been watching us all along, waiting to judge whether we live or die." Celine's gaze faltered. "I didn't want to. I didn't want to be the one to decide. But now I've seen you. I've felt you. I've seen what humans can do, your capacity for both destruction and love. And I can't let it end like this." Ethan was silent for a long moment. He couldn't process what she was saying. The weight of it was too much, the enormity of it far beyond anything he could understand. But he swallowed, his throat tight. "What does this mean for Earth? For us?" Celine's voice was quiet, almost broken. "It means you have a choice. You have a chance to prove your worth. But it won't be easy. It'll take everything you have. What do we need to do?" Ethan asked, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never felt this small, this powerless, but Celine was asking him to believe in something bigger. He didn't know how, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let her down. Celine met his gaze, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "We have to stop the Council. They're ready to destroy everything you've ever known. They think you're beyond saving. But I believe in you. I believe in us." Ethan's throat tightened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he saw something in her eyes that wasn't fear or guilt. It was hope. He leaned forward, his voice resolute. "Then let's fight. Let's show them we're worth saving." A small, but genuine, smile touched Celine's lips. For the first time since their journey began, she seemed lighter. As the pod zoomed through the vast emptiness of space, they both knew the road ahead would be dangerous. They had angered powerful forces, and the stakes were higher than ever. But for the first time, Ethan felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. They had a chance. And together, they would make sure it wasn't wasted. Suddenly, a soft, mechanical hum echoed through the pod. Celine glanced at the control panel and pressed a few buttons, her brow furrowing. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his pulse quickening. She didn't answer immediately, her eyes scanning the data flashing before her. Then she spoke. "They've already begun. The Council, they've initiated the process." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What process?" Celine looked up at him, her voice steady but filled with resolve. The trial has begun. We don't have much time. We have to act now, or Earth will be lost forever. The pod shuddered beneath them, and the stars outside began to swirl faster, as if the very fabric of space was shifting around them. They were plunging into the heart of the unknown, and there was no turning back. Ethan looked at Celine, his hand instinctively reaching for hers. Then let's make sure they don't win. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were fighting. And this time, they would fight for Earth, and for the future that still had a chance to unfold. Here is the story ends. If you enjoyed and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Let us know in comments if you want next chapters to publish soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, we'll keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.